Hi, and welcome to another Odd Job Motors test report. We're out on beautiful Lake Zor today. It's Saturday, August 25th, 2012, and we're running a little Elgin 2 horsepower. As most of you guys in the antique outboards know, Elgin was a brand that was sold by Sears and Roebuck, and from 1947 through about 1958, the bulk of them were all made by the West Bend Aluminum Company. They started out with a little air-cooled single that was 1 1/4 horsepower, and in 1952 they upgraded to a 2 horsepower model, which is basically the same as this model, which is a 1953 version. The 571-58201, which was offered in 1952, was a 3.76 cubic inch single cylinder motor. It's a 1 3/4 bore by 1 9/16 stroke. And in 1953, the only difference really between the 571-58201 and the 202, which is 53, is that they added an addition of a scoop on the outlet and back of the propeller to cool the leg with some water splashed up through it. These motors are pretty much as basic as you can get. You wrap a pull cord around the top. Later on they did add a recoil starter. It's got a manual throttle, and it's got controls, choke on the side over here, and a needle valve here, and a fuel shutoff here. And the only other thing is the air tap in the back for the tank. You can spin it all the way around to get it into reverse. This is a nice original example that I got from a friend of mine, Bill Wright, up in Massachusetts. Bought it for a whopping $25 for him. It was seized, I believe, at the time, but I don't think it's got a lot of hours on it. I think it was just sat for a really long time. Anyway, let's try and give it a spin here and see if it'll go, and you can experience the thrill of the Elgin 2 horsepower. Now the key with these motors is to run them on a good gas-oil mix. I like to use 3/4 of a pint of air-cooled 2-stroke oil per gallon of gasoline. Unfortunately, over the years, a lot of people have tried to run them on 50-to-1 with water-cooled oil, and because of the air cooling, they actually run a fair bit hotter than a water-cooled motor. So finding one that has good compression can sometimes be a challenge. If they're in good shape, they're a very nice little motor. They're light. They weigh about 30 pounds. And for, an entry-level outboard motor at the time, they really are pretty good. They're pretty quiet. They're relatively smooth. They're not going to get you anywhere in a hurry. My grandfather bought one of these motors brand new. And after he had had a stroke and he couldn't row his heavy skiff anymore, he decided that he had to get an outboard. He kept his boat at a marina that was about a mile from his house, and he liked to be able to row down to it in the morning and work on the boat, go out sailing, and then come back in and row home. But after his stroke, he couldn't do that anymore, so he ran down to Sears, being a diehard Sears man, and bought one of these little 2 horsepower motors. Well, as you can see here, the performance is relatively sedate. My aluminum Duranautic here, while it is something of a battleship, is a lot lighter than the 15-foot wood skiff that he had. So against the tide and the wind, he found that he basically couldn't make any headway with the little 2 horsepower. So after the first or second time he tried it, he put it in his basement. My grandfather died in 1971, and it was a year or two later I was at my grandmother's house helping out doing some chores, and I discovered that motor in the basement. So I asked her, instead of paying me for the chores, if she would give me the outboard, and she was happy to do it. She hadn't even realized that it was still in her garage. So that was my first outboard motor. That was a 1958 model, and I don't unfortunately have it anymore. I traded it away when I was a kid, but I do have a replacement for it now. I did a pretty extensive write-up on these little Elgin 2 horsepowers on my Odd Job Motors website. If you're interested in them, please feel free to go and check that out. There's a lot of service information and some tips and tricks there for getting them running. Anyway, that's the Elgin 571-58202, 2 horsepower. I hope you've enjoyed the short introduction to it. We'll see you out on the water.